The wooden platform creaked beneath Penelope Zimmerman's worn boots as rough hands shoved her forward into the harsh Wyoming sunlight, and she knew with sickening certainty that this dusty street in Laramie would be where her dignity died. "Step right up, gentlemen. Fresh merchandise from the East." The auctioneer's voice boomed across the crowded square, his tobacco-stained teeth flashing in a predatory grin. "Though I'll be honest with you good folks, this one's got a bit of history. Damaged goods, you might say, but still young enough to be useful." Penelope's cheeks burned as dozens of eyes raked over her thin frame. Her dress, once a respectable blue calico, now hung in tatters around her ankles. Bruises mottled her arms in various stages of healing, yellowing reminders of the wagon train disaster that had left her stranded and desperate. The respectable families who had survived the attack had made it clear there was no place for an unmarried woman with a tarnished reputation, never mind that the reputation had been built on lies and circumstance. "What's wrong with her?" called a portly man in a checkered vest, squinting up at her with suspicious eyes. "Nothing that affects her ability to cook, clean, and work," the auctioneer responded smoothly. "Her wagon train was attacked by raiders 3 weeks back. She was missing for 5 days before the cavalry found her. You know how it is, gentlemen. But she's strong, young, and won't complain about her lot in life. Starting bid at $20. Penelope wanted to scream that nothing had happened during those 5 days, that she had hidden in a cave surviving on rainwater and wild berries, that her only crime had been being too terrified to come out until she heard English voices. But she had learned that the truth mattered little when people had already decided what to believe. The crowd murmured and shifted, but no hands rose. $20 was apparently too much for damaged goods. 15 then. Come now, surely someone needs help around their property. Silence. Penelope's stomach twisted. She had heard whispers of what happened to women no one would buy. The saloons always needed workers, and those women rarely lived to see 30. $10. That's practically stealing, gentlemen. From the back of the crowd, a tall figure moved. Penelope noticed him only because everyone else seemed to part naturally as he walked, as if he carried an invisible boundary with him. He was lean and weathered, probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that brushed his collar and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. His clothes were simple but well-maintained, a working rancher's outfit, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that seemed at odds with the careful distance he kept from others. "I'll pay 15, he said, his voice low and rough like gravel underfoot. The auctioneer's face lit up. "Well now, we have a bidder. $15 from Logan Garrett. Anyone care to make it 20, Logan?" Penelope committed the name to memory, studying the man who had just purchased her future. His eyes met hers briefly, and she was startled by what she saw there. Not the hungry calculation she had expected, but something else. Something that looked almost like recognition, though they had never met. When no other bids came, the auctioneer banged his gavel against the platform. "Sold to Logan Garrett for $15. Come settle up, sir, and collect your property." Property. The word made Penelope's jaw clench, but she forced herself to remain still as Logan approached the auctioneer, counted out coins from a worn leather pouch, and accepted a hastily scrawled bill of sale. Then he turned to her, and up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver just beginning to thread through his dark hair at the temples. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. "My wagon's at the end of the street." It was the gentleness in his tone that nearly undid her. She had been braced for cruelty, for ownership, for all the things she had convinced herself she could endure if it meant avoiding the saloons. Instead, this stranger spoke to her as if she were a person, not property. "Yes," she managed, her voice hoarse from disuse. She had barely spoken in days. He nodded and turned, not grabbing her arm or forcing her to follow, simply walking with the apparent expectation that she would come. After a moment's hesitation, Penelope stepped off the platform on shaking legs and followed him through the dispersing crowd. The wagon was nothing special, a working ranch wagon with weathered sides and a team of 2 sturdy horses. Logan checked the harness with practiced efficiency before finally addressing her again. "You can ride up front or in the back. Your choice. It's about 2 hours to the ranch." "Front," Penelope said, because riding in the back felt too much like being cargo. He offered his hand to help her up, and she took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. He climbed up beside her and took the reins, clicking his tongue to start the horses moving. They rode in silence through Laramie's dusty streets, past the saloons and mercantiles, past the marshal's office and the church with its white painted steeple. Penelope watched it all, wondering if she would ever see the town again, wondering what kind of life awaited her at this man's ranch. "I should tell you some things," Logan said finally, once they had left the town behind and were rolling across the open prairie. "So you know what to expect." Penelope tensed but said nothing. "I have a ranch about 8 miles out, cattle mostly, some horses. Had it for 5 years now. It's not fancy, but it's profitable enough." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I live alone. No wife, no children. My parents are dead. I have a sister back east, but we don't talk much anymore." "Why did you buy me?" The question burst out before Penelope could stop it. Logan's hands tightened on the reins. "Because nobody else would, and I know what happens to women nobody buys." "That's it. Charity, maybe." He glanced at her sidelong. "Or maybe I recognized something." "What?" "The look of someone who's been judged for things outside their control." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "People in this town have long memories. They remember my father was a drunk who beat my mother. They remember she killed herself when I was 15. They remember I found her. Some folks can't separate the son from the father's sins, so they keep their distance. I learned to prefer it that way." Penelope absorbed this, the casual way he had laid his own pain bare. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Don't be. It was a long time ago." He shifted his weight and the wagon creaked. "Point is, I'm not expecting anything from you beyond honest work. There's plenty to do on a ranch. Cooking, cleaning, tending the garden, helping with the animals if you know how. In return, you get food, shelter, and safety. That's the arrangement. What if I want to leave? Then you leave. I'm not keeping prisoners." He said it so simply, as if it were obvious. "Though I'd appreciate notice so I can arrange for help elsewhere." It was too good to be true. Penelope waited for the other boot to drop, for the conditions and expectations that would reduce her to something less than human. But Logan just drove the wagon across the rolling grassland, his eyes on the horizon, apparently content with the silence between them. The ranch appeared gradually, resolving from the shimmering heat haze into solid structures. A modest house, single-story but well-built, with a covered porch. A large barn, a corral, several smaller outbuildings. Cattle dotted the surrounding hillsides, and Penelope could see a creek glinting in the distance. "It's beautiful," she said without thinking. Logan looked at her in surprise. "It's just a ranch. It's more than I expected to see again." The admission cost her something, a small piece of the armor she had built around herself. He nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes, and guided the horses toward the barn. After unhitching them and seeing to their care with quiet competence, he led Penelope to the house. The interior was neat but sparse, clearly the home of a man who lived alone. A main room served as kitchen and living space, with a stone fireplace at one end and a simple table with 2 chairs. 2 doors led to what she assumed were bedrooms. "That one's yours," Logan said, indicating the door on the left. "It was my parents' room, but I cleaned it out years ago. There's a bed, a dresser, a washstand. Not much else, but you can add what you like if we go to town." Penelope opened the door to find exactly what he had described. The room was small but clean, with a window looking out toward the creek. A patchwork quilt covered the bed, faded but serviceable. It was the first space that had been truly hers in months. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. "Kitchen's got supplies," Logan continued, moving to the cook stove and checking the wood supply. "I usually eat simple. Eggs in the morning, something hot for dinner. Can you cook?" "Yes. My mother taught me before she died." "Good, I'll show you where everything is." He proceeded to do exactly that, pointing out the root cellar, the smokehouse, the chicken coop, the garden that clearly needed attention. He explained his routines, his work schedule, the fact that he was often out from dawn until late afternoon managing the cattle and horses. "If you need anything, ring the bell by the porch. I'll hear it and come back. If there's trouble, serious trouble, fire the rifle 3 times. I'll come running." "You're giving me access to a rifle," Logan's expression was almost amused. "The rifle's for emergencies. There are wolves, sometimes bears, occasionally drifters who don't respect property. You should know how to protect yourself. You know how to shoot." "My father taught me, but I'm not very good." "We can work on that." He moved to the door, then paused. "I meant what I said earlier. You're safe here. I'm not my father, and I don't hurt people smaller than me. You work. I'll pay you fair wages in addition to room and board. 6 months from now, if you want to leave, you'll have enough money to start somewhere else. That's my promise." He left before she could respond, heading back to his work as if he hadn't just upended every assumption she had made about her future. Penelope stood in the kitchen for a long moment, trying to process the strange turn her life had taken. Then, because standing still had never solved anything, she set about exploring her new home more thoroughly. The kitchen was functional, with cast iron pots hanging from hooks, basic supplies in the cupboard, and a good knife that held an edge. She found flour, salt, dried beans, coffee, and a jar of sourdough starter that was miraculously still alive. The root cellar held potatoes, onions, carrots, and several wheels of cheese. The smokehouse contained several slabs of bacon and some venison. It was more than adequate for preparing meals. Penelope felt the first stirring of interest she had experienced in weeks. Cooking had always soothed her, the precise measurements and familiar rhythms a meditation of sorts. She spent the rest of the afternoon taking stock and beginning to clean in earnest. The house was tidy, but it had the feel of a place maintained rather than lived in. She swept the floors, wiped down surfaces, and began preparing dinner with the supplies she found. By the time Logan returned as the sun was setting, the house smelled of baking bread and beef stew. Penelope heard him on the porch, the sound of him shaking dust from his clothes and stomping his boots clean before entering. It was a courtesy she hadn't expected. He stopped in the doorway, surprise clear on his face. "You didn't have to do all this today." "I needed to stay busy," Penelope said, ladling stew into bowls. "And you need to eat." They sat at the table and she watched nervously as he took the first bite. His eyes closed briefly. "This is good," he said quietly. "Really good. I haven't had cooking like this since my mother died." "It's just stew. It's more than that." He took another bite, and they ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. "I know this situation isn't what you would have chosen, being auctioned like property, ending up on a stranger's ranch in the middle of nowhere. I'm sorry for what brought you to that platform." Penelope set down her spoon. "Why are you being kind to me? The auctioneer made it clear what people think happened. People think a lot of things. Most of them are wrong." Logan met her eyes across the table. I don't know your story, and you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. But I know the look of someone telling the truth, and you had that look when the auctioneer was spinning his version." "Nothing happened," Penelope said, the words tumbling out. "During those 5 days, nothing happened. I hid in a cave. I was too scared to come out, even when I heard people calling. By the time I finally emerged, everyone had decided what must have occurred. The respectable families wouldn't have me near their daughters. The men looked at me like I was already ruined. So when someone suggested Laramie, where I might find work, I had no choice but to agree. I didn't realize what kind of work they meant until I was on that platform. And the wagon train attack, real. The raiders killed 6 people, including the wagon master. They took supplies, horses, anything valuable. I ran when the shooting started. I just ran and kept running until I found the cave. I probably should have been braver, should have helped somehow, but I was terrified." Logan was quiet for a moment. "Being scared doesn't make you a coward. It makes you human. And surviving makes you strong, whether you feel strong or not." Penelope felt something crack inside her chest, some tight band of shame and fear that had been constricting her breathing for weeks. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I'm sorry," she gasped, wiping at her face with shaking hands. "I don't usually do this." "You've been through something terrible," Logan said simply. "Tears aren't weakness. They're just proof you're still feeling, still fighting." He didn't try to comfort her physically, didn't reach across the table or offer empty platitudes. He simply sat with her while she cried, his presence steady and undemanding, and somehow that was exactly what she needed. When she finally composed herself, he helped her clear the dishes, working alongside her at the wash basin as if it were the most natural thing in the world for a rancher to help with kitchen work. "Tomorrow, I'll show you the animals," he said as they finished. "The chickens are easy enough, but the horses have personalities. It helps to know them. I'd like that." He nodded and headed for his room, pausing at the threshold. "Penelope, that is your name, right? The auctioneer mentioned it." "Yes, Penelope Zimmerman." "Penelope," he repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "Sleep well. Tomorrow's a new start." That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in months, Penelope stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of her good fortune. Logan Garrett was nothing like what she had expected. He was quiet where she had anticipated demands, gentle where she had braced for roughness, respectful where she had feared entitlement. It was too good to be true. But as sleep finally claimed her, she allowed herself the dangerous luxury of hope. The days began to establish a rhythm. Penelope woke before dawn to start breakfast, learning Logan's preferences through observation and occasional questions. He liked his coffee strong and black, his eggs over easy, his bacon crispy. He ate efficiently but with appreciation, always thanking her before heading out to his work. While he was gone, she tackled the house and surrounding areas with growing confidence. The garden needed significant attention, and she spent hours pulling weeds, reinforcing the fence against rabbits, coaxing the struggling plants back to health. She collected eggs from the chickens, fed them kitchen scraps, and learned each hen's particular quirks. True to his word, Logan showed her the horses. There were 6 altogether, 4 working horses and 2 green-broke yearlings he was training. He introduced her to each one, explaining their temperaments, showing her how to approach them safely. "This is Copper," he said, stroking the nose of a rangy bay gelding. "He's my main riding horse. Smart but stubborn. You have to ask him politely, or he'll pretend he doesn't understand." Penelope extended her hand cautiously, and Copper snuffled at her palm, his whiskers tickling her skin. "He's beautiful. He knows it too." Logan moved to the next stall. "This is Daisy. She's the most reliable horse I've ever known. She'll take care of you even if you're barely hanging on." When you're ready to ride, you'll start with her. When I'm ready, can't live on a ranch without being able to ride. I'll teach you if you want to learn." Penelope found herself nodding. The thought of being on horseback terrified her after the wagon train attack, but the idea of dependence terrified her more. "I want to learn." Over the following weeks, Logan proved to be a patient teacher. He started her on Daisy in the corral, teaching her how to sit properly, how to hold the reins, how to communicate with the horse through subtle shifts of weight and pressure. When she tensed up, remembering the chaos of the attack, he talked her through it in that low, steady voice until her breathing calmed. "You're doing well," he said one afternoon as she successfully guided Daisy through a series of turns. "Better than I expected for someone so new to it." "I'm terrified," Penelope admitted. "I know. But you're doing it anyway. That's what courage looks like." She looked down at him from Daisy's back, this quiet man who had saved her from a fate worse than death and asked nothing in return except honest work. He stood with one hand on Daisy's neck, squinting up at her against the sun, and she felt something shift in her chest. Not love, not yet, but the recognition of goodness, of fundamental decency that was rarer than gold. "Why haven't you married?" The question slipped out before she could reconsider it. Logan's expression closed slightly. "Asked a woman once. She said yes, then changed her mind when her parents reminded her about my family. After that, I figured it was easier to stay alone. That must have hurt." It did. "But pain passes, and alone turned out to suit me well enough." "Does it really?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I thought it did. Maybe I was wrong." The air between them felt suddenly charged, full of words unspoken and possibilities unexplored. Then Daisy shifted, breaking the moment, and Logan stepped back. "That's enough for today. Walk her cool, then we'll put her up." As spring deepened into summer, the ranch thrived. The garden burst into abundance under Penelope's care, providing fresh vegetables that transformed their meals. She learned to make cheese from the milk Logan brought from town, to preserve food for winter, to manage the household with increasing efficiency. But more than the practical skills, she learned Logan himself. She learned that he was softest with animals, speaking to them with a gentleness he rarely showed humans. She learned that he read by firelight in the evenings, mostly books about ranching and animal husbandry, but occasionally poetry that he thought she didn't notice. She learned that he suffered nightmares sometimes, that she would hear him moving restlessly in his room, and that by morning he would be hollow-eyed but determined to face the day. She learned that he was lonely, deeply and profoundly, even if he had convinced himself otherwise. One evening, about 3 months into her time at the ranch, a storm rolled in from the mountains. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the house, and lightning painted everything in stark white flashes. Penelope finished cleaning the dinner dishes and moved to the window, watching the rain sheet down. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Logan said from behind her, making her jump. "Terrifying," she corrected. "But yes, beautiful too. The cattle don't like it. They'll be skittish tomorrow." They stood side by side, watching nature's violence play out across the prairie. Another crack of thunder, and Penelope flinched despite herself. "Are you afraid of storms?" Logan asked. "Not usually. But the night of the attack, there was a storm. I think that's why the raiders came when they did. They knew we'd be distracted, disorganized." Logan's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry that happened to you." "I'm not anymore," Penelope said, surprising herself with the truth. "If it hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here, and being here has been good." "Has it?" She turned to face him fully. In the flickering light from the fireplace and the occasional lightning flash, his face was all shadows and angles, but his eyes were soft, uncertain in a way she rarely saw. "Yes," she said firmly. "You saved my life, Logan." Not just by buying me off that platform, but by treating me like a person worth saving. You gave me back my dignity. You always had dignity, I just gave you a place where people would see it. Why? She stepped closer, drawn by something she didn't fully understand. Why me? There must have been others over the years who needed help. There have been, he admitted, but I never stepped forward before. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I had enough to manage without taking on someone else's troubles. What changed? Logan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, almost too low to hear over the rain, "You looked at that crowd like you were bracing to die but refused to beg. There was strength in you, even beaten down as you were. And I thought maybe someone that strong deserved a chance to find out what she could do with it." Penelope's breath caught. "That's the most words I've ever heard you string together." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You bring out my verbose side." "Logan," she said, reaching for the words to express what she was feeling. "I want you to know something. These months here, they've been the best of my life. Not because of the ranch or the work, but because of you. You're a good man. Better than anyone I've ever known." He looked stunned, as if the concept of his own goodness was foreign. "Penelope, I'm just doing what any decent person would do." "No, you're not. Most people wouldn't have even looked at me on that platform. They had already decided what I was worth, and it was nothing. You saw something different." "I saw you," Logan said simply. "Just you, without all the judgment and assumptions." They were standing very close now, close enough that Penelope could see the pulse beating at his throat, could smell the rain and leather and something essentially him. Her heart was racing, and she knew she was about to step off a cliff into unknown territory. "Can I tell you what I see when I look at you?" she asked. Logan nodded, not trusting his voice. "I see a man who has convinced himself he doesn't deserve good things because his father was cruel and the woman he loved betrayed him. I see someone who works himself to exhaustion because stopping means thinking, and thinking means feeling. I see loneliness so deep it's become part of who you are." She paused, gathering courage. "But I also see kindness, strength that doesn't need to prove itself, hands that are gentle even when they're rough, and I see someone I could love if you'd let me." Logan's eyes widened, and for a moment he looked almost afraid. "Penelope, you don't owe me anything. You know that, right? You can leave whenever you want. You don't have to say these things. I'm not saying them because I owe you. I'm saying them because they're true." She reached up, resting her palm against his cheek. He leaned into the touch like a man starving for contact. "I'm saying them because somewhere in the last 3 months, I fell in love with you, and I think maybe you might feel something for me too." "I do," he breathed. "God help me, I do. But Penelope, I'm broken. My father's blood runs in my veins. What if I turn out like him? You won't. You've had every opportunity to hurt me, to take advantage of the power you hold over me, and you never have. Not once. You're not your father, Logan. You're the man you chose to become despite him." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "I don't know how to do this, how to be with someone, how to be enough." "Neither do I," Penelope admitted, "but maybe we can figure it out together." Logan's hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his face. "I'm going to kiss you now. If you don't want that, tell me to stop." "Don't stop," she whispered. He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, and pressed his lips to hers. It was gentle, almost reverent, nothing like the brutish claiming she had feared in her darkest moments. It was a question and an answer, a beginning and a homecoming. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Logan rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said, the words rough and unpracticed but utterly sincere. "I think I have since the moment I saw you on that platform, looking so fierce and so scared at the same time." "I love you too," Penelope replied. My quiet rancher who saw a woman worth saving." "You saved yourself," Logan corrected. "I just gave you the space to do it." They stood wrapped in each other's arms while the storm raged outside, two broken people finding wholeness in each other's acceptance. It was the beginning of something neither had dared to hope for, a future built on respect and growing love rather than obligation and fear. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Logan courted her properly, as if they were respectable town folk rather than a rancher and the woman he had bought off an auction block. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, taught her to ride well enough to accompany him sometimes on his rounds of the property, sat with her in the evenings reading aloud from his books. They talked, really talked, sharing the stories of their lives. Penelope told him about growing up in Pennsylvania, about her father's death when she was 16, her mother's lingering illness that had taken 3 years to kill her. She told him about the desperation that had driven her to join the wagon train heading west, hoping for a fresh start and maybe teaching position in Oregon. Logan shared memories of his childhood that he had buried for years. The good times before his father started drinking heavily, when his mother had been happy and his father had been a different man. The gradual descent into violence and fear. Finding his mother in the barn, her body swaying from the rafters, and the soul-deep knowledge that he had failed to protect her. "I was 15, he said one night, his voice hollow. "Old enough to know what was happening but not strong enough to stop it. I tried to get her to leave, to take my sister and me away from him. She said she couldn't, that she had nowhere to go and no way to support us. 2 weeks later, she was dead. What happened to your father? He drank himself to death within a year. Part of me thinks he loved her in his twisted way, and losing her broke what was left of him." Logan stared into the fire. "My sister went to live with our aunt back east. She wanted me to come too, but I couldn't leave. This ranch, this land, it was the only thing I had left that wasn't tainted by what happened. So I stayed, worked like a madman, and built something clean." Penelope took his hand. "You built something beautiful. You became someone she would be proud of." "I hope so." He squeezed her fingers. "Some days I wake up afraid I'll find the anger in me, the violence, that I'll become what I hate most." "You won't," Penelope said with absolute certainty. "Because you're aware of it, afraid of it. Your father never questioned himself. You question everything. That's the difference." As summer reached its peak, Logan began making plans. He rode into Laramie one day and returned with a small velvet box that he tucked carefully into his dresser. Penelope pretended not to notice, giving him the space to do things in his own time and his own way. One evening, he saddled both Copper and Daisy and asked if she would ride out with him. They headed toward the creek, following it upstream to where it tumbled over rocks in a series of small waterfalls. The setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber, and the air was sweet with the smell of prairie grass. Logan dismounted and helped Penelope down, then stood holding both sets of reins, suddenly looking nervous in a way she had never seen before. "I'm not good with words," he started. "You know that about me. I tend to keep things inside, let them rattle around until they smooth out into something I can handle, but this can't wait for that process." Penelope's heart began to race. "You came into my life when I had convinced myself I didn't need anyone. That being alone was safer, easier, better than risking getting hurt again. And maybe it was safer, but it wasn't better. It wasn't even close to better." He pulled the velvet box from his pocket, hands shaking slightly. "You make everything better. The house feels like a home. The work feels meaningful because I'm building something for us instead of just for me. The future looks like something to anticipate instead of just endure." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small but perfect diamond. "I know we come from different worlds. I know this isn't the life you probably imagined for yourself. But if you'll have me, if you'll take a chance on a quiet rancher who doesn't always know how to say what he feels but feels it all the same, then I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." "Logan," Penelope breathed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Penelope Zimmerman, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said, launching herself into his arms with enough force to make him stagger back. "Yes, absolutely yes." He caught her, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, his hands were gentle as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "How did you know my size?" she asked. "I paid attention," he said simply, "to everything about you. The way you move, the way you think, the way you hum while you're cooking. I've been memorizing you since the day I brought you home." They kissed as the sun set behind them, sealing their promise with all the passion they had been carefully restraining. Logan's hands tangled in her hair, and Penelope pressed closer, wanting no distance between them ever again. "When?" Logan asked when they finally broke apart. "When do you want to get married?" "Soon," Penelope said. "As soon as we can arrange it. I don't need anything fancy, just you, me, and someone to say the words that make it official." "Are you sure? Most women want a proper wedding." "I'm not most women," Penelope pointed out. "And you're not most men. We make our own rules." Logan's smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face into something radiant. "That we do." They rode back to the ranch in the gathering twilight, hands clasped between their horses, already making plans. Logan would go to town tomorrow to speak with the circuit preacher about performing the ceremony. They would need witnesses, which meant asking some of Logan's ranch hands, men who worked part of the year for him during roundup and cattle drives. Penelope would need a dress, something better than her work clothes but nothing elaborate. That night, they sat on the porch watching stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. Penelope leaned against Logan's shoulder, his arm around her waist, and felt peace settle into her bones. "I never thought I'd be happy again," she said softly. "After the attack, after the auction, I thought the best I could hope for was survival. But this is so much more than survival. This is actually living." "We're both living for the first time in a long while," Logan agreed. "You gave that back to me. The ability to feel something other than going through motions. We gave it to each other." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Yes, we did." The circuit preacher came through Laramie 2 weeks later, and Logan arranged for him to come to the ranch on a Sunday afternoon. True to her word, Penelope kept things simple. She wore a dress she had sewn herself from blue fabric Logan had brought back from town, her hair braided and wound into a simple crown. Logan wore his best shirt and pants, clean-shaven and nervous as a colt. The ranch hands came as witnesses, 3 weather-beaten cowboys who had worked for Logan for years. They stood awkwardly in their Sunday best, hats in hand, but their grins were genuine as the preacher read the traditional words. "Do you, Logan Matthew Garrett, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Logan said, his voice strong and sure. "And do you, Penelope Rose Zimmerman, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Penelope replied, her eyes locked with Logan's. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming and Almighty God, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Logan cupped her face in his hands and kissed her sweetly, thoroughly, while the ranch hands hooted and applauded. When they broke apart, both were flushed and grinning. The celebration was simple but heartfelt. They had prepared a meal together, roasted beef and potatoes and fresh bread, with a pie Penelope had made from wild berries. The ranch hands told stories about Logan's various mishaps over the years, painting a picture of him that made Penelope laugh until her sides hurt. There was the time he tried to break that roan stallion, one of them, a grizzled cowboy named Pete, said between bites. Thing threw him so hard he landed in the water trough. Just sat there dripping, looking surprised as hell. Or when he decided to fix the barn roof himself and fell through into the hay loft, added another Jim, his face creased with amusement. Scared the horses half to death. Logan bore the ribbing with good grace, his arm around Penelope's waist. Keep talking and you'll find yourselves assigned to the worst jobs next roundup. Worth it, boss, Pete said with a gap-toothed grin. Worth it to see you happy. Been working for you 5 years now, and this is the first time I've seen you smile like you mean it. As evening fell, and the hands departed back to their own cabins on the far side of the property, Logan and Penelope finally found themselves alone as husband and wife. The house seemed different now, charged with new possibilities and the weight of promises made. Logan took her hand, suddenly shy in a way that endeared him to her even more. I've never done this before, he admitted. Been with a woman, I mean. I want to make it good for you, but I'm not sure I'll know how. Penelope squeezed his fingers. We'll figure it out together, just like everything else. They moved to their room, Logan's room now theirs, and in the gentle lamplight they discovered each other slowly. Logan was careful to the point of hesitation, constantly checking that she was comfortable, that he wasn't hurting her. Penelope found his uncertainty sweet, a reminder that for all his strength and capability, he was vulnerable in this moment, trusting her with a part of himself he had never shared. I love you, she whispered against his skin. I love you so much. I love you too, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. More than I knew it was possible to love someone. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, Penelope's head on Logan's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal. His fingers traced patterns on her shoulder, gentle and reverent. Are you happy? He asked softly. Happier than I've ever been, Penelope replied honestly. I didn't know I could feel like this, complete. Like I've been waiting my whole life for you to show up and make sense of everything. She pressed a kiss to his chest. We're going to have a good life together. The best, Logan agreed, holding her closer. As autumn painted the prairie in shades of gold and rust, Penelope and Logan settled into married life with the same ease that had characterized their courtship. They worked side by side, preparing the ranch for winter, preserving food, making sure the buildings were secure against the harsh weather to come. Penelope discovered she was pregnant in October. She had suspected for a few weeks, but it wasn't until she missed her second monthly cycle that she allowed herself to believe it. She told Logan over breakfast on a crisp morning when frost sparkled on the windows. I have something to tell you, she said, watching his face carefully. Logan looked up from his eggs, immediately alert to the seriousness in her tone. What is it? Are you all right? I'm fine. Better than fine. She reached across the table to take his hand. I'm going to have a baby. We're going to have a baby. The play of emotions across his face was extraordinary. Shock gave way to joy, joy to fear, fear back to overwhelming happiness. Are you sure? As sure as I can be. I'll see the doctor when we go to town next, but yes, I'm sure. Logan stood abruptly, came around the table and pulled her into his arms. A baby, he breathed. We're going to have a baby. Are you happy? Penelope asked, suddenly uncertain. They had never discussed children, and she realized with a flutter of anxiety that she had assumed he would want them. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, Logan said, pulling back to look at her. Terrified, yes. Afraid I'll be a terrible father, absolutely, but happy beyond words. "You're going to be a wonderful father," Penelope assured him. "You're already so gentle with the animals, so patient when you're teaching me things. A child will be lucky to have you." "I want to be different from my father," Logan said, the old fear creeping into his voice. "I want to be the kind of father a child can trust, can come to with problems." "Then you will be. Because you're already thinking about what kind of father you want to be. Your father never did that. He just reacted, lashed out, used his strength to hurt instead of protect. You would never do that." Logan nodded, trying to believe her. When? When will the baby come?" "Late May, I think, maybe early June. We'll need to prepare a cradle, more clothes, maybe we should add a room to the house." Penelope laughed at his sudden eagerness. "We have time. Months yet, let's just enjoy the news for now." But Logan was already planning, his mind racing ahead to all the things they would need, all the ways he could make their home safer and more comfortable for a child. Watching him, Penelope fell in love with him all over again. This was a man who would move mountains for his family, who would give everything to make sure his child never knew the pain he had endured. Winter came hard and fast that year. Snow piled high around the ranch buildings, and there were days when Logan couldn't venture far from the house. He spent those days working on the cradle, measuring and sawing and sanding with meticulous care. Penelope watched him work, knitting tiny clothes and imagining their future. They talked for hours during those snowbound days, planning what they would teach their child, what values they would instill, what kind of life they wanted to provide. Logan read aloud from books on child rearing he had ordered from a catalog, often looking up with wide eyes at some piece of advice. "It says here that children need affection and praise," he said one evening, "that you should tell them you love them every day. Did your parents not do that?" "My mother did before things got bad. My father never. I don't think he knew how." "Then you'll do better," Penelope said simply. "You'll tell our children you love them every single day and they'll never doubt it." "Children," Logan raised an eyebrow. "Plural." "If we're blessed with more than one, yes. I was an only child and it was lonely. I'd like our children to have siblings." Logan smiled. "Then we'll have as many as you want." As winter softened into early spring, preparations intensified. Logan did add a small room onto the house, working with the ranch hands to frame and finish it properly. It would be the nursery, with windows facing east to catch the morning sun and enough space for a cradle, a dresser, and a comfortable chair for nursing. Penelope made curtains for the windows, bright yellow to bring cheer on cloudy days. She arranged the tiny clothes she had made in the dresser drawers, marveling at how small they were, trying to imagine a baby small enough to fit them. In late April, they made the trip to town so Penelope could see the doctor. He confirmed what she already knew and pronounced her healthy and progressing well. "Baby should come in late May," the doctor said, marking it in his ledger. "Send for me when the time comes, or have someone fetch the midwife. She's closer and just as capable." On the way home, they stopped at the mercantile for supplies. The store owner, a round woman named Mrs. Henderson, beamed when she saw Penelope's condition. "Well now, doesn't that explain the order of baby things Logan's been placing? Congratulations to you both." "Thank you," Penelope said, surprised by the warmth in the woman's voice. The people of Laramie had been distant when she first arrived, clearly aware of how she had come to be at Logan's ranch and uncertain what to make of her. But marriage and pregnancy seemed to have shifted their perception. She was respectable now, a rancher's wife, worthy of acknowledgement. Or perhaps, she thought later, Logan's own standing had improved. He was clearly happy, clearly thriving, and people could see the change in him. It was harder to maintain judgment when the evidence of its wrongness was so obvious. As May arrived and Penelope's belly grew round and tight, Logan became increasingly protective. He insisted she rest more, do less heavy work, let him handle anything that required bending or lifting. It was sweet, if occasionally frustrating when she felt perfectly capable. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she reminded him when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I know, but you're carrying our child and I'm not taking any chances." He took the laundry basket from her gently but firmly. "Humor me." She did, because she could see the fear beneath his protectiveness. Fear that something would go wrong, that he would lose her the way he had lost his mother, that happiness this profound couldn't possibly last. She tried to reassure him with words and touch, but she knew only the baby's safe arrival would truly ease his worry. The pain started just after dawn on the 28th of May. Penelope woke Logan immediately, and he sprang into action with the controlled panic of someone determined not to fall apart. He sent Jim riding for the midwife, then helped Penelope settle in their room, trying to remember everything he had read about birthing. The midwife, a capable woman named Sarah who had delivered half the babies in the county, arrived within 2 hours. She shooed Logan out of the room, insisting he would only be in the way, and set about her work with efficient competence. Logan paced the main room like a caged animal, jumping every time Penelope cried out, his face growing paler with each hour that passed. Pete sat with him, having come up to the house to check on things. "First babies take time," the old cowboy said gruffly. "She's strong, she'll be fine." "You don't know that," Logan said through gritted teeth. "Women die in childbirth, it happens. Not to women with Sarah attending, she's the best there is." The day stretched endlessly. Noon came and went. Afternoon faded into evening. Logan refused to eat, refused to sit still, his entire being focused on the closed bedroom door and the sounds coming from behind it. Finally, as sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, a new sound pierced the air. A baby's cry, thin and indignant and absolutely beautiful. Logan froze, hardly daring to believe. Moments later, Sarah emerged, wiping her hands on her apron, her face creased in a satisfied smile. "You have a son," she announced. "Strong and healthy, just like his mother. She did beautifully." "Can I see her?" Logan asked, already moving toward the door. "Give me a minute to get her settled, then yes." It was the longest minute of Logan's life. When Sarah finally beckoned him in, he entered the room slowly, almost reverently. Penelope lay propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiating joy. And in her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was the tiniest human Logan had ever seen. "Come meet your son," Penelope said softly. Logan approached the bed as if in a dream. He looked down at the baby, at the miniature features, the tiny fists waving near his face, the eyes that seemed to be trying to focus on this new world. "He's so small," Logan whispered, afraid to speak too loudly. "You want to hold him? I might hurt him." "You won't." "Sit down and I'll show you how." Logan sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and Penelope transferred the baby into his arms. The weight was negligible, but the feeling of holding his son for the first time was monumental. This tiny person was half him, half the woman he loved, and wholly perfect. "What should we name him?" Penelope asked. They had discussed names, but none had felt quite right. Now, looking at his son, Logan knew. "Thomas," he said. "After my grandfather, he was a good man, the only member of my father's family who was. If our son can be half as good, he'll be someone to be proud of." "Thomas Garrett," Penelope tested. "I like it. Thomas Matthew Garrett." Logan looked up at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me this, for giving me everything." "We gave it to each other," Penelope reminded him, echoing the words from their engagement. "Just like we always do." Little Thomas proved to be a relatively easy baby, much to his parents' relief. He nursed well, slept in reasonable stretches, and seemed content to observe the world with solemn dark eyes that reminded Penelope of Logan's. Logan was a devoted father from the first moment. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor during fussy periods, sang soft lullabies in his rough voice. Watching him with their son, Penelope saw all his walls come completely down. He had learned to be open with her, but with Thomas, he was utterly unguarded from the start. "I love you," he told the baby constantly, just as he had promised. "You're safe and you're loved, and I will always protect you." As Thomas grew from infant to baby to toddler, the ranch thrived. Logan expanded the herd, hired more permanent help, built additional structures. The little ranch that had been a solitary man's refuge transformed into a proper family homestead. Penelope bloomed in motherhood, though she maintained her independence and capability. She taught herself bookkeeping and took over managing the ranch's finances, discovering she had a head for numbers. She expanded the garden to impressive proportions, selling excess produce in town. She made the house a true home, warm and welcoming in a way it had never been. When Thomas was 2, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. The pregnancy was easier the second time, her body knowing what to do, her mind free of the fear that had shadowed the first. Logan was still protective but less frantically so, trusting in the process even as he worried. Their daughter arrived on a snowy December morning, coming so fast that Sarah barely made it in time. She was smaller than Thomas had been, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that proved she could make herself heard. "Anna," Penelope said, looking down at her daughter. "After your mother." Anna Rose Garrett. Logan, holding Thomas so he could meet his sister, felt his heart expand in a way he hadn't thought possible. 2 children, a son and a daughter, a family he had created not through violence and fear but through love and intention. Life settled into a rhythm again, busier now with 2 small children but no less happy. Thomas proved to be a gentle boy, careful with his baby sister, always wanting to help his parents. Anna was fiery from the start, demanding and stubborn but also affectionate and quick to laugh. When Anna was 3 and Thomas 5, Penelope suggested they host a harvest festival at the ranch, inviting neighboring families. Logan was hesitant at first, unused to socializing, but he agreed because he could deny her nothing. The festival was a success. Families came from miles around, children playing together while adults shared food and conversation. Logan found himself actually enjoying the company, his defenses lowered by years of love and security. Pete, watching Logan laugh at something one of the other ranchers said, came up to Penelope with a knowing smile. "You've worked miracles with him, you know. When I first started working here, he barely spoke 2 words. Now look at him. A husband, a father, a man who smiles." "We worked miracles with each other," Penelope corrected, but she was pleased nonetheless. As the children grew, Logan taught them everything he knew about ranching. Thomas took to it naturally, following his father everywhere, asking endless questions about the cattle and horses. Anna was more interested in the animals themselves, spending hours in the barn talking to the horses, naming all the chickens, crying when they butchered pigs for winter meat. "She has a tender heart," Logan said one evening, watching Anna feed an orphaned calf by bottle. "Like her father," Penelope replied, leaning against his shoulder. "I'm not tender." "You absolutely are. You just hide it from most people." Logan couldn't argue with that. He had built walls around himself for so many years that tenderness had seemed like weakness. But Penelope and the children had taught him differently. Tenderness was strength, the willingness to be vulnerable, to care even when caring hurt, The years flowed by like water. Thomas grew tall and serious, so much like Logan that it sometimes took Penelope's breath away. Anna grew into a spirited young woman, fearless and kind in equal measure. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Logan and Penelope grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies wearing the marks of hard work and good years. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it deepened, becoming the bedrock on which everything else was built. One evening when Thomas was 18 and about to head to the university in Cheyenne, and Anna was 16 and already breaking hearts in town, Penelope and Logan sat on their porch watching the sunset. It had become their ritual, this quiet time together at the end of each day. "You remember the day we met?" Penelope asked. "Every detail," Logan replied. "You looked so fierce standing on that platform, so determined not to break. I was terrified. I know, but you didn't let it defeat you." He took her hand, fingers intertwining with familiar ease. "I was terrified too, afraid I was making a mistake, afraid I wouldn't know what to do with you, afraid you would see through me to all the brokenness inside." "I did see it," Penelope said, "but I also saw everything else. The goodness you didn't believe you had. The capacity for love you thought had been beaten out of you. I saw the man you could become if someone just gave you a reason. You gave me a reason. You gave me everything." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching their world painted in sunset colors. The life they had built together was spread out before them, tangible and real, and so much more than either had dared to hope for on that day in Laramie, when a desperate woman and a lonely man had found each other. "I would do it all again," Penelope said softly. "Every difficult moment, every fear, every uncertainty, because it led me to you." "I would stand on that street corner 1,000 times," Logan replied. "I would pay 1,000 times what I paid, because you're worth everything, Penelope. You always were." As the sun dipped below the horizon, they rose and went inside together, to the home they had made, to the family they had created, to the love that had saved them both. Years continued to pass, bringing the changes that time always brings. Thomas did go to university, studying animal husbandry and modern ranching techniques. He returned with new ideas and a young woman named Elizabeth, a rancher's daughter from near Cheyenne. They married in the same simple ceremony his parents had, on the same spot, and Logan found himself becoming a grandfather. Anna eventually married too, to a young veterinarian who had come through town and fallen instantly in love with the spirited woman who could gentle any horse and out-argue any man. They settled nearby, close enough to visit often, far enough to build their own life. The ranch passed into Thomas's capable hands as Logan aged, though he never fully retired. He was out checking cattle well into his 60s, riding Copper's successor with the same quiet competence he had always shown. Penelope remained his partner in all things, her mind still sharp even as her body slowed. Their love story became legend in the region. People told their children about the auction in Laramie, about the quiet rancher who had seen worth where others saw only damage, about the woman who had been strong enough to accept his love and return it. They told it as a reminder that goodness existed, that people could change, that love could heal even the deepest wounds. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration. The ranch house was full to bursting with family and friends. 3 generations gathered to honor the couple at the center of it all. Logan, silver-haired but still strong, stood with Penelope, her hand in his as it had been for 4 decades. "Speech," someone called out, and others took up the cry. Logan, who had never been comfortable speaking to crowds, cleared his throat awkwardly. But when he looked at Penelope, the words came easily. 40 years ago, I thought I knew what my life would be. Alone, quiet, safe in isolation. Then this woman appeared and showed me I had been living only half a life. She taught me that safety isn't the same as happiness, that walls keep out joy as effectively as pain, that love is worth every risk. He paused, his voice growing rougher with emotion. I bought her for $15. It was the best investment I ever made, though calling it an investment demeans what she is. She's my partner, my best friend, the reason I wake up grateful every single morning. She saved my life as surely as I saved hers. We saved each other. Penelope was crying now, tears streaming down her lined face. You were supposed to be the quiet one, she said, her voice thick. Now look at you giving speeches. You bring out my verbose side, Logan replied, echoing the words from that first storm so many years ago. The room erupted in laughter and applause, but Logan and Penelope only had eyes for each other. 40 years, and the sight of her still made his heart race. 40 years, and he still couldn't believe his luck. They danced that night, slowly and carefully, their bodies no longer young but their hearts unchanged. Around them, their family celebrated, the fruit of their love and determination. Children, grandchildren, and even one great-grandchild, all existing because a quiet rancher had seen past society's judgment to the woman beneath. As Logan and Penelope grew older still, they made preparations. The ranch was secure in Thomas's hands. Their financial affairs were in order. They had made their peace with mortality, understanding that all stories must end. Logan went first, at 72, dying peacefully in his sleep with Penelope beside him. His last words were, "I love you," the same words he had spoken to her every day of their marriage. Penelope mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had been given 43 years together, far more than either had expected on that day in Laramie. She had loved him completely and been loved completely in return. It was more than most people ever received. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by her family, still sharp and engaged with the world. She told her grandchildren stories about their grandfather, about the man who had been quiet and broken and chose to become something else. He saved me, she would tell them. But not in the way people think. He didn't rescue me from danger or give me things I couldn't get myself. He saved me by seeing me truly, by believing I was worth the effort of love. And I saved him by loving him back, by refusing to let him hide from happiness. When Penelope's time came, she went peacefully, a smile on her face, her children holding her hands. Her last thought was of Logan, of seeing him again, of picking up the conversation they had been having for over 4 decades. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, simple markers noting their names and years. But their real monument was the life they had built, the family they had raised, the love they had proven was possible even in the hardest circumstances. The ranch continues still, passed down through generations, each one hearing the story of how it began. How a woman was auctioned as damaged goods, and a quiet rancher saw only a woman worth saving. How they saved each other, built a life together, and proved that love, real love, can transform everything it touches. It's a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth believing in. Because it's true. Every word of it true. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, a quiet rancher and the woman who taught him to smile sit together on a porch, hands intertwined, watching sunsets that last forever. Their love as eternal as the land they once worked together. The end.